Tier 1. The Cult of Pythagoras, aka Pythagoreanism. This cult was founded in the 6th century BC by someone you'd never have guessed, math genius Pythagoras. He believed in a combination of science and mysticism. Understanding the cosmic order was their way to be one with the divine cosmos. For a math club, they also surprisingly believe in reincarnation. To achieve this, they had to keep their bodies pure, so no one was getting any play, which couldn't have been hard. The Pythagoreans believed that when you expelled your bodily fluids and even gas, you would lose a part of your soul. Now you know how you feel empty after every nightly session. They had their own sets of rules, like wearing white, remaining chaste, not peeing towards the sun, and avoiding beans for some reason. Maybe Pythagoras didn't want to be stuck with gassed-up dudes. If you didn't laugh, you haven't suffered at the hands of beans, and it shows. Moving on. The most important rule of the Pythagoras cult was that you don't talk about the Pythagoras cult. No joke, one of his followers was executed because he told a few of the teachings to the masses. Pythagoras, in true cult leader fashion, gave himself some stat upgrades. He was 3/4 of an avatar since he could predict earthquakes, calm the seas, and stop the wind. And he could also remember past lives. After the death of Pythagoras, which was ironically by fire, he was elevated to god status by his students, and his cult lived on. The Church of Kopimism, or the Masonry Church of Kopimism, was founded in Sweden in 2010 by Isaac Gerson and Gustav Nipe. This church considered the act of copying and sharing information to be divine and sacred, even calling it a virtue. Identity thieves are going to love this one. In true nerd fashion, they don't conduct physical congregations. They just meet up in a group chat and praise information before calling it a day. They even conduct rituals that involve the worship of information through copying, a practice known as copy acting. Their holy symbols are Control-C and Control-V. I swear I'm not making this up. This cult was officially recognized by the Swedish government in 2012, so you can join if it's up your alley. For legal purposes, that is a joke. John from Cargo Cult. To understand this cult, you'll need a history lesson. In World War II, America used small Pacific islands as strategic military bases to gain a foothold against Japan. These small Pacific islands had indigenous tribes who weren't as technologically advanced nor had much experience with the outside world. For the island tribes, the experience of seeing humans who wore weird clothes, spoke in tongues, had these magical portable cures, and could even take life without touching the other person was probably nothing short of meeting an alien or a god. Imagine if you brought someone from the Stone Age to this world. They would rightfully think we were magicians or gods. The tribes of these islands came to the same conclusion. They would worship the Americans as divine beings who blessed them with gifts. And their god was some American GI called John Frum. After World War II ended, America just packed up and left. But the tribes didn't really understand that concept, and so they came to the conclusion that these divine beings would come back if they imitated them and performed certain rituals. So they replicated what they could remember. They built planes, landing strips, and even control towers in hopes that their god John Frum would come back with their precious cargo. But surprisingly, no one humored these people, and they're still waiting for their cargo. The White Brotherhood. This cult was founded by Peter Konstantinov in 1897 in Bulgaria. Unlike Pythagoras, who was secretive and exclusive with his cult, these guys went international. From Bulgaria, this cult went on to spread to France, Canada, Switzerland, and Belgium. Their teachings were a mix of Christianity, mysticism, and spirituality. They believed humans were born with divinity. And to connect with that divinity, they do meditation, breathing exercises, and prayers. The white in their name does not refer to their skin color. Rather, it is the white magic they used against the evil black magic. They're all about equality, unity, and singing Kumbaya together. The Brotherhood's version of prophets were called Ascended Masters. These were people who had been reincarnated many times and had ascended to immortality. They were believed to be responsible for the guidance of the human race. Yeah, you guys might want to petition for a change in management. Some examples of Ascended Masters are Master Jesus, Confucius, Buddha, and Saint Mary. The Brethren, also known as the Garbage Eaters, was founded by Jimmy T. Roberts in the early 1970s. They were your average doomsday cult with teachings centered around how the end of times is coming soon, and humans need to purify themselves in preparation. To join the cult, you have to sell all your possessions and even break ties with your family. Basically, ditch everything but your existential dread. Members of the Brethren are forbidden from celebrating anything. No birthdays, not even Christmas. This is because they believe all celebrations should be kept for the end of times. Plus, they lived as nomads, collecting discarded food from dumpsters, hence the name. To recruit more members, they would just send out pairs to preach. But how do you convince people to join you if this is the life you're offering them? The Brethren's lifestyle and beliefs have led to controversy and criticism. Some former members have reported experiencing various forms of abuse, including excommunication of anyone who disagrees, manipulation and control of members, and a lack of accountability for leaders. So even when you have nothing, you can still be taken advantage of. Jim, the founder of the Brethren, died in 2015 at the age of 76 from cancer. The leadership role of the organization was passed to Jerry Williams, aka Brother Hatzer, and 3 other elders. The cult is believed to still be active. The Agon Shu, or Agama school, was founded in 1954 by Kiriyama Seiyu, based on the early Buddhist scriptures called Agamas. The Agon Shu basically follows the OG versions of the scriptures and teachings of Buddha, rejecting the deviations. They practice the 7 systems and 37 practices by Buddha mentioned in the early scriptures. The 7 systems are principles, and the 37 practices are pretty self-explanatory. Both of these are necessary to develop spiritually and attain enlightenment. Did anyone get enlightenment, you might ask? No. The cult never really defines what enlightenment is. They only give subjective definitions. You're better off getting enlightenment from watching paint dry. The Agon Shu grew to have more than 500,000 members, growing with the times. They hired a public relations company to spread the message, and even offered spiritual services through the internet. Seems pretty tame, right? But it never really is. The cult would convince followers to donate large sums of money for ancestor worship, which is basically a way to honor dead relatives through offerings of food or drink. They would also manipulate and control members by convincing them the spirits of their ancestors were infuriated with them. After the founder, Kiriyama, passed away, Agon Shu became more obsessed with him rather than Buddha. The new leaders would claim to receive messages from Kiriyama from the spirit realm, and these messages were considered sacred. The cult was also dragged under the bus again during the Tokyo subway sarin attack. Not to spoil much, the founder of the cult that carried out the attack had briefly been a member of Agon Shu. This connection led to people adopting a hostile attitude towards the cult. Appalachian Snake Church. The practice of snake handling in religious services originated in the Appalachian region of the United States in the early 20th century. It is often attributed to George Went Hensley, who brought a snake to a church service in 1909. Snake handlers base their practices on a literal interpretation of certain Bible verses, such as Mark chapter 16, verse 18. They shall take up serpents, and if they drink any deadly thing, it shall not hurt them. And Luke chapter 10, verse 19. Behold, I have given you the power to tread upon serpents and scorpions, and upon all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall hurt you. They believe handling venomous snakes is a demonstration of their faith and obedience to God, even going as far as to claim anyone who died from getting bit by a snake simply wasn't faithful enough. This sounds like the witch trials all over again. If she's a witch, she'll live. If not, she'll die. Do you see the big brain logic? Snake handling was primarily practiced in small, isolated churches in the southern Appalachian region, particularly in Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. During services, believers will pick up and handle venomous snakes as an act of faith. Children are generally prohibited from participating, thank God. Ironically, George Hensley later on died from a snake bite. Karma does its work. The Church of Scientology. This is one of the more famous entries you've probably heard of. The Church of Scientology was founded in December 1953 by L. Ron Hubbard, a science fiction writer. Do I need to go on? Okay. In Scientology lore, in a faraway galaxy, there existed the Galactic Confederacy, ruled by an evil, tyrannical ruler, Xenu. The Galactic Confederacy was an ancient civilization that faced overpopulation, so to solve the problem, Xenu does what all dictators do: genocide. He throws them into the volcanoes on Earth, vaporizing them with hydrogen bombs. And here, their spirits, known as Thetans, attach themselves to all living things. Here's where Scientology comes in. They claim that by buying their course, you can control and harness the Thetan inside of you to gain various superhuman abilities. But this level of knowledge is locked behind many paywalls. To reach the level of operating Thetan, or OT, will cost you thousands, and that will only give you access to some information. To reach OT3, where you supposedly get the good stuff, you need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars, along with a good portion of your time. I'll save your money and tell you where to find this super secret C-grade creation scripture. It's called Revolt in the Stars by the father of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard. I mean, what do you expect? Just look at this building. Does it not look like Villain HQ? Their appraisal also stems from the fact that you can believe in any other religion while being a Scientologist, but saying everybody can enter doesn't mean everybody can leave. There's a lot of harassment involved for leaving, along with dissuasion tactics, and finally, an NDA. While celebrities like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, Grant Cardone, Danny Masterson enjoy their relationship with the church, ex-members like Ron Miscavige, Katie Holmes, and Leah Remini have come out to expose what the cult is really like. David Miscavige, the current leader of the Church of Scientology, is working the marketing department to the bone, it seems. Upbeat music, flashy commercials, they even managed to get a Super Bowl commercial. All that marketing has another function though, burying their scandals and controversies. Either they bury the controversies or bury the source of the controversy. Allegedly. There are many deaths linked to the church, like Susan Meister, Edward McBride, Liz McPherson, and the leader's own wife, Shelley Miscavige. Tier 2. Kuman Thong. This cult is also associated with black magic, but on a much more disturbing level. Kuman Thong originates in Thailand, and its practitioners are essentially necromancers who seek out dead baby fetuses. The witch doctors, as they call themselves, would surgically remove the unborn fetus from the womb of its mother, roast it, and then paint it with yalak, a kind of lacquer used to cover amulets, and taproot with gold leaf. This is where the name Kuman Thong, meaning golden little boy, comes from. Why do they have this kind of morbid practice? Well, they believe these golden fetuses will bring good luck and fortune to the owner if properly worshipped. But they do say for every request you make of the Kuman Thong, there is a consequence to bear. Which just sounds like a horror movie waiting to happen. Look at this. They're essentially spirits who can help humans for a price. They can see and hear for a distance of 20,000 kilometers, giving ample protection to any household. And because they're the souls of literal children, they are said to love playing tricks. Even with these cool, albeit dark little perks, the cult is heavily criticized by the Buddhist community and has been made illegal. Koan Kroach cult. Another cult obsessed with fetuses is the Koan Kroach cult, which is rooted in Southeast Asia, particularly in Cambodia. Now, these guys create amulets instead of golden baby corpse statues because I guess they needed a travel-size version. The amulet from the mummified fetus is obtained from either a dead or living mother. Followers of the cult believe that these amulets possess spiritual powers and can bring fortune to the owner. This taboo and unsettling practice is also heavily criticized, but has not yet been made illegal. 5% Nation, also known as the Nation of Gods and Earths. 5% Nation emerged from the teachings of Clarence Smith, a former member of the Nation of Islam. The beliefs of the 5% Nation are like the Nation of Islam, but on steroids. After leaving the Nation of Islam, Clarence renamed himself Allah the Father and began preaching about his belief. The name 5% Nation comes from a core belief of the cult that only 5% of the population holds the truth. 10% are oppressors and exploiters, and 85% are unaware and misled. The 5%ers reject the teachings of mainstream religion and instead focus on self-awareness, knowledge, personal empowerment, and most importantly, black empowerment. They also believe that white people are literally the demons who have come up from hell. That explains this. And black men are closer to, or the embodiment of the divine deity, Allah. The black women are referred to as Earths, hence the name Nation of Gods and Earth for the people in the back. Now, this belief has landed them in hot waters, but the cult has been linked to gangs and criminal activities, especially in urban areas like New York City, so I don't think they care. They allegedly have influenced hip-hop artists, especially during the golden era of rap. Artists like Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, Wu-Tang Clan, Brand Nubian, Nas, and Jay-Z have either been members of the 5% Nation or incorporated its teachings into their music. Jay-Z was actually seen wearing a medallion associated with 5% Nation. The medallion of the 5% Nation has a 7 with a star and sun as part of its symbolism. The number 7 on the medallion represents God, the star symbolizes knowledge, and the sun represents the authority of God over the planets and stars, as well as the proper order of the universe. This symbolism reflects the core principles of knowledge, wisdom, and the divine nature of black people within the universe. Though whether Jay-Z is an active member or not is unclear. The Church of the Firstborn. This cult is an offshoot or spin-off of the mainstream Mormon church founded in the 1950s by Joel LeBaron. Being an offshoot, their belief system differs from mainstream Mormonism. They consider the Bible the ultimate source of doctrines and practices. They also rejected the Christian interpretation of the Holy Trinity, where they described God as three separate persons: the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The Church of Firstborn used the term non-Trinitarianism to describe their stance. Non-Trinitarianism is the belief that God is one indivisible unity, or exists as three manifestations of himself. The Christian belief is that God exists as three distinct entities, and some people just stop at God exists, ? The cult is very patriarchal and encourages polygamy. They also don't believe in medicine, going as far as to call it a weakness of faith or even a sin. Instead, they opted for faith healing, which is basically pray the gay away, but with illnesses. The church was slammed with manslaughter lawsuits because of this, and legal action was also taken against individuals, such as parents who let their kids be victims of faith healing. The Church of Firstborn holds many beliefs that are considered controversial, such as rejecting participation in war, advocating for traditional gender roles where women are expected to stay at home and care for children, and promoting the practice of greeting each other with a holy kiss. The founder, Joel LeBaron, was murdered in 1972. The hit was allegedly orchestrated by his own brother, Ervil LeBaron, who is just one letter away from his true form. But we'll be getting into that later on. The Love Israel family. This was a communal cult founded in 1968 by Paul Erdman, who later changed his name to Love Israel. Members of the cult collectively adopted a single surname, Israel, along with biblical first names. The core teachings of the cult were love, oneness, and bringing the presence of God into everyday family life. The name Love Israel is a play on one of their 4 affirmations: love is real. The other 3 are we are one, love is the answer, and now is the time. The commune says it had ground marriages, but it's mainly Paul or Love just trying to catch them all. He created his own harem, enforcing a strict rule: no outside relationships and no birth control. He would also loan his wives to elders who worked below him. He held complete authority and power within the group. His word was law for them. He controlled the finances of the group and demanded obedience if they wanted to remain there and be taken care of. The members were subjected to strict discipline, being told how to dress, eat, and behave. The hierarchical structure of the group didn't really let the parents raise the children. According to the cult, they weren't your children anymore. They were our children. A layer of elders operated just beneath Love Israel, overseeing houses, managing business affairs, and addressing social concerns. This being a patriarchal family structure, the women were on the back burner, following the traditional gender dynamics. They also conducted rituals like animal sacrifices as part of their spiritual practice. The Church of Euthanasia. Well, this one, albeit shocking, is pretty self-explanatory. The Church of Euthanasia was founded by Chris Korda in the 1990s. It mainly advocates for population control through voluntarily pressing Control-Delete on life. The idea of the church came from where all religious cults start: a dream. Chris Korda was visited by an intelligent alien life form and warned about Earth's dying ecosystem. The church is built on 4 pillars: suicide, abortion, cannibalism, and sodomy. They believe these pillars are the only way to curb population growth and environmental degradation. Now, why haven't these people committed mass suicides? The founder actually answers in a cute little FAQ section on their official website. Suicide is surprisingly optional in the cult. Chris Korda specifically said she'll delete herself when she feels like it. The website once had detailed steps on how to delete yourself, but they took it down after someone actually did it using their instructions. The body was found with a printout from the website, so there was no denying it for them. I just want to mention that their reason for encouraging cannibalism is that eating animals hurts the environment, and humans are in abundance, so you might as well solve your problem there. Either dead or consensually, of course. They're not monsters. And there are people who believe that the church is either a performance art piece or just not that serious. They just want to reduce human impact on the environment, albeit through a little radical means. But I'll leave the decision up to you. The Church of the SubGenius. Ivan Stang and Philo Drummond founded the Church of the SubGenius in the late 1970s. When you go up looking for answers as to what the church is on its website, you get this response: pity the poor human earthpink who comes looking for a simple, short explanation of the Church of the SubGenius, TM. One that he or she can understand quickly. If the church could provide that, it would be bigger than Islam or Christianity by now, and probably much, much worse. Talk about an introduction. The group has been described as a performance art piece, irony, satire, or a money-grabbing scheme. But that's a lot of energy invested into a joke. The prophet of the Church of SubGenius is a fictional salesman from the 1950s, J.R. Bob Dobbs. To attain enlightenment status, members must follow 4 laws. Stop working, buy the church products, go against law and order, further the goals of the church by harnessing the power of fear, and eliminate anyone who is not of the Yeti lineage. Yes, the church believes that the members are descended from Yetis. The Church of SubGenius is also a doomsday cult. They believed an alien would come to destroy everything and would only spare those who paid the church. How convenient. Tier 3. The Holy Spirit Association for the Unification of World Christianity. Now that's a mouthful of a name. Also known as the Unification Church for short, was founded on May 1st, 1954 in South Korea by Sun Myung Moon. When Moon was 16 years old, he was visited by Jesus himself and asked to finish the task of establishing God's kingdom. Now, Moon's interpretation of biblical events is interesting, as it lays the foundation for the rituals of his church. In his book, The Divine Principle, he details that mankind is part of a sinful lineage because Eve was influenced by the devil to do the deed with Adam. So, we're out here fighting intrusive thoughts because some people couldn't keep it in their pants? Now, of course, he was the only one who could solve this problem that he created. As the second coming of Jesus, he would pick out couples to wed. He and his wife would bless them as true parents, and they could become a true family free of sin. Sounds like a guy just trying to make the world a better place, right? Well, no. Members of the church would be encouraged to do spiritual sales, which involved scamming people into thinking they were in contact with the family's deceased loved one. They would sell them various items to guarantee the salvation of the deceased loved one. Members of the church were also coerced to donate, with some donating outrageous amounts outside their means. But this wasn't all. The cult is surprisingly well organized, working in over 100 countries currently, and even have a leg in policy through their deep political ties. Many of Japan's high-ranking politicians, including the former Prime Minister of Japan, Shinzo Abe, have allegedly been linked to the Unification Church. Political corruption, orgies and scandals, financial coercion, and scamming aside, this cult has become the cause of death of Shinzo Abe. His murderer was the son of a grieving mother who was financially taken advantage of by the church. The murderer's life was just a roller coaster of tragedy after tragedy. I'll leave that for the paragraph guy in the comments. Also, Moon's dead, but the cult lives on through his wife and children. The Coconut Cult, or more popularly known as Sonnenorden, Order of the Sun, was founded by August Engelhardt, a German nudist and vegetarian in 1902. The belief system is rather simple: the unconditional worship of the sun and coconuts, considering the coconut as the pinnacle of all living things on Earth. Engelhardt saw a coconut and then he looked at the sun and came to the conclusion that coconuts were the closest fruit to the sun, even though oranges were right there too. Anyway, he thought coconuts embodied solar energy and divine nourishment. His philosophy revolved around the idea that continuous consumption of coconuts would lead to immortality. I guess philosopher's stones are out and pina coladas are in. In another version, Engelhardt believed that the fruit resembled the human head and was the most suitable food for humans. He even allegedly wrote devotional poems and treatises extolling the virtues of coconuts, viewing them as a divine creation, closely linked to human existence. So the members of the cult stayed on a coconut-only diet to gain immortality. But of course, this diet has severe health consequences for many of his followers. Malnutrition, various deficiencies, and illnesses like malaria became prevalent due to the lack of a balanced diet. Some even died. Because they were obsessed with coconuts, followers of the cult faced social isolation and disconnection from mainstream society. Engelhardt's obsession with coconuts and sun worship led to his own mental and physical deterioration. He became delusional and fanatic over the years, and so the German government eventually banned the cult. The Family International, previously known as Children of God. This cult was founded by David Brandberg. And I know the name sounds really nice, but after coming this far into the list, you're too smart to be fooled by names. David Berg was messed up way before he started his cult. His childhood could be summed up as a strict con woman Christian mother, violating punishments, incestuous thoughts, and too much time with his right hand. All the ingredients to create the not-so-perfect cult leader. He started the cult in the 1960s, after the high of the hippie way of life was coming down. He preached about the end times and how the system was against them. Yes, David Berg was the OG red pill alpha male who could save them from the system, one orgy at a time. But unlike most cult leaders, David didn't claim to be God. Rather, he claimed to be a prophet of God. How humble. To recruit more members for the cult, he would send out attractive women and tell them to share God's love with other men, seducing them into joining the cult. Basically religious prostitution, but also called flirty fishing. Needless to say, the tactic worked, and the cult gained thousands more members. As the cult got more members, David's preaching turned from fight the system to God wants us to be polygamous and share wives so that we can get into heaven. David's tactics to control his flock were simply fear, distraction, and deprivation. Members would give up all their possessions when they joined. He would then assign them to one of 12 groups he referenced from the Bible, and they would be put to work. From morning to night, he would not allow these poor souls time to think. He kept them busy and distracted with memorizing verses or work. Why did people stay in the cult? I don't know, maybe you guys can explain better in the comments below. David would promote polygamy, activities with children, wife sharing, incest, orgies, and just a lot of very disgusting activities. I probably can't talk in detail about some of the stuff this old degenerate sack of skin did without getting demonetized, but just know whatever you can imagine, it was worse. On a positive note, all these orgies had their unintended consequences. Herpes. Not enough karma, but at least some karma. In 1994, the world would finally be rid of the human stain that is David Berg, but the cult would continue under his second wife, Karen Zerby. It was at this point that they changed the name to Family International. They currently have more than 10,000 members in over 90 countries. Do they still do the same activities? Well, they say no, but who can say for sure? Falun Gong, also known as Falun Dafa, was founded in China in 1992 by Li Hongzhi. Originally, Falun Gong started out based on the traditional Chinese beliefs and practices focused on improving physical health and spiritual well-being. Li initially started out taking advantage of the booming popularity of Qigong, a Chinese deep breathing exercise technique. While he was practicing Qigong as a state-registered master, he began telling his spiritual journey to people. And yes, he was basically the second coming of Jesus. According to his claims, he could become invisible, travel through space, and levitate. In truth, he was just a clerk at some company. But I guess what they don't know won't hurt them. Li published a guide of his teachings for his growing followers, and this had some very interesting theories, to say the least. He promised people they could gain supernatural abilities like eternal youth, invisibility, and mind control, but only if they weren't gay or married to someone of another race. Li believed that mixed children did have a place in heaven, as it was racially segregated. And then he gets weirder. Li claimed aliens are trying to corrupt mankind through science. All the modern innovations like computers, airplanes, modern medicine, etc. were given to humans by the aliens. Why, you ask? Well, because they want to replace humans and live on Earth. I don't know what's crazier, his ideas or the aliens actually considering living on this crumbling planet. The members were also expected to devote their entire lives to Li Hongzhi and the cult. They would be monitored and pressured to follow the teachings without question. Li's growing popularity and absolutely brainwashed followers were being noticed by the secular Chinese government, especially after Li ordered that responding to criticism from the government would be an essential step in gaining enlightenment. Maybe Li thought he was untouchable with his 2 to 3 million followers, but he was playing with fire here and it finally burned him. After brutally suppressing many protests in 1999, China officially banned Falun Gong. It's never as simple as just passing an order with China. The crackdown on Falun Gong members led to cases of torture, disappearances, enforced ideological conversions, forced labor, and even death. The Creativity Movement. Formerly known as the Church of the Creator, it was founded by Ben Klassen in 1973. It was called a church, but in reality, they were an atheist group that believed in a form of social Darwinism. They claimed that the fittest race should be the one to dominate, and by that, they meant white people. Sound familiar? Ben Klassen was a big fan of Hitler, calling him a pioneer, and even actively recruited neo-Nazis into the group. The Creativity Movement preached that race, not religion, embodies absolute truth, and the white race was the pinnacle of culture and civilization. I shortened it for you, there's a lot of self-praise here. They considered themselves as some kind of warriors who are in a racial holy war, where non-white subhuman mud races are trying to subjugate white people. And to prevent humanity from descending into slavery and misery, the white race must win. Yeah, I wish I was kidding. Before they could win their holy war, Ben Klassen committed suicide in 1993, and another member, Matt Hale, took over the leadership, and the group became even more violent. But thankfully, in 2004, he was arrested for soliciting the murder of a federal judge who had ruled against him and the movement in a lawsuit. After his arrest, the group remains largely inactive. Tier 4. Universal Medicine. Serge Benayan, a former bankrupt tennis coach from Australia who has no medical qualifications, is the man behind the cult, Universal Medicine. This cult promotes healing through energy, also known as esoteric healing. Their practices included techniques like esoteric breast massage, chakra puncture, ovarian readings, and esoteric connective tissue therapy. All of these intended to balance the body's energy field and promote self-healing, but of course would get very inappropriate very fast. One man reported that he felt an assigned massager probe his buttocks, and when asked why, he said he pulled out an evil energy snake from his back door. So if you've been feeling a little iffy down there, maybe you have an evil energy snake that needs to be pulled out too. Reincarnation and karma are other important tenets in their belief system. They claim that any health issues are due to your karma from a past life. Building on that concept, they firmly believe that people who have a disability or have been assaulted are the reincarnation of evil historical figures. But of course, Serge Benayan traces his lineage back to history's A-lists, from Plato to Jesus, and even throws in a sprinkle of reincarnated Da Vinci for extra spice. So naturally, with this super legit family tree, he obviously has to become humanity's savior. This man claims there is a master race of footless, 9-foot-tall aliens or supernatural entities who are always around sniffing humans. Why, you ask? Well, they apparently love the smell of a person of God. I guess the only way to throw off your scent would be to smear yourself in Epstein's blood. But if blood makes you queasy, don't worry. Serge has a more or less morbid solution. To prevent these entities or aliens from entering the human body, there are certain foods you'd have to avoid, like carrots, potatoes, coffee, dairy, and even gluten. Why even bother with eating at this point? It seems Serge agrees because along with the restrictive diet, he also restricted his followers to only eating one meal a day. For an adult, this might suffice, but the problem is children as young as 10 months old were being forced to follow this diet as well. Even after people were getting ill from this diet, his followers continued to blindly obey him, to the point of excommunicating their family members and leaving all their wealth to Universal Medicine, aka Serge. The reason they do this is because Serge has brainwashed them to believe that if parents leave wealth to their children, it will harm them in their next life. How convenient for Serge. Serge was very much enjoying his transformation from a broke tennis coach to a millionaire, but things won't go his way for long. In 2019, the New South Wales Supreme Court recognized that Universal Medicine was a socially harmful cult, and Serge Benayan was a fake who inappropriately touched his clients and girls as young as 10 who stayed in his house. But Serge had no remorse for his actions and published a pseudo-interview on his Universal Medicine's YouTube channel, claiming he was the victim of an internet witch hunt. The Order of the Solar Temple. The Order of the Solar Temple was founded in 1984 in Geneva, Switzerland, by Luc Jouret and Joseph de Mombro. The order was based on the ideals of a medieval military religious order called the Knights Templar, and they took this very seriously, with the capes, swords, secret rituals, and meetings. Why not just play a game of D&D at this point? One way to join the cult would be by being introduced by someone who is already a member, and the other way was just paying your way in. This was a very useful method to gain some funds and build connections for the cult at the same time. And so, like many cults, the Order of the Solar Temple also had power, money, and exploitation at the core of its system. The leaders of the cult, Jouret and de Mombro, would use their position to exploit the female members of the cult. They even broke up marriages, claiming none of the pairs were cosmically compatible, and then proceeded to get down and dirty with the recently single wives. The more the cult grew, the more delusional the teachings became. Luc Jouret believed that he was the third reincarnation of Jesus Christ, and de Mombro believed his children were messiahs who would bring about the new age after the apocalypse. And the only way to prepare themselves for this high spiritual existence was purification through fire. In 1994, one of the members, Tony Dutoit, who helped deceive the followers with illusions, would reveal the fraud of the leaders, but this angered Jared and Mombro. The cult leaders declared that Tony's infant son was the Antichrist. This declaration served as enough of a reason to execute a ritual murder of Tony Dutoit, his wife, and his 18-month-old son. The family was lured to one de Mombro's villas where they were stabbed to death. The two cult members who murdered them set fire to the villa, unaliving themselves as well. Just a few hours after this, authorities would discover 22 bodies from a burned-down lodge in Switzerland and 25 more bodies from another temple. This was only the beginning, as between 1994 to 1997, 74 more people died. Did they go willingly or not is unclear. The bodies do have gunshot wounds and bruises, but they could be part of some morbid ritual. Surprisingly, the Order of the Solar Temple is still around and remains very secretive. The Nuwaubian Nation. The Nuwaubian Nation, founded and led by Dwight York, emerged in Brooklyn in the early 1970s. York was heavily influenced by the Nation of Islam's ideology of black supremacy, so he began his own black Muslim group to get a piece of the pie. York either knew what he was doing too well or he had no idea and was winging it. I'd bet my money on the latter, because over time, York changed the group's teachings and names multiple times, incorporating concepts from various religions and esoteric beliefs, gaining some followers from all his various beliefs. It's astounding to think people would trust themselves to someone who just wakes up every day and says, "No, this is the right religion today." It doesn't even stay in the same theological categories. Nuwaubian Nation came into being in 1991 on one such day. York moved his followers to a remote area and built an ancient Egypt-themed compound. They had 2 pyramids, obelisks, and statues of Egyptian leaders. The belief system of the cult is rather bizarre and complex. They're a mix of black supremacist ideas, Egyptian worship, UFO conspiracy theories, the Illuminati, throw in some Abrahamic religious teachings, and just a smidge of Eastern philosophy. This man was playing gotta catch 'em all religion version. And of course, at the center of this belief system was York himself as God. And as God, he was entitled to everything his followers could offer. Their time, finances, resources, their wives, and even themselves. York would often put the men to work, and while they worked, he'd have his way with their wives. He kept families separate and often engaged in intimate behavior with men, women, and also children. In one case, he adopted a girl illegally from Uganda and proceeded to treat her like a slave, even withholding food, forcing her to sleep on the floor, and violating her. This does have a positive end. In 2004, York was sentenced to 135 years in prison for molesting children and other crimes. After York was arrested, the Nuwaubian Nation declined, with most followers abandoning the group. But it's still around. The Church of the Lamb of God. Remember the Church of the Firstborn led by Joel LeBaron? Well, now we continue the story after he was allegedly murdered by his brother. The Church of the Lamb of God was founded by Ervil LeBaron. As all cult leaders do, Ervil threatened to execute those who refused to accept him as God's representative and obey him. Whether they were a part of the church or not, everyone had to believe him. He brings back the former Mormon principle of blood atonement to use against anyone he deemed a threat. Blood atonement is pretty self-explanatory. To save the souls of people who committed a sin, they needed to atone with their blood. The group was very violent, with an estimated 20 to 30 murders attributed under their belt. The church was also polygamous, with Ervil having 13 wives and at least 25 to 50 children. And he wasn't just abusing the women and children of his family, he was doing it to all the members of his cult. He was doing everything nasty under the sun, abusing members of his cult, indoctrination, assault, child abuse, underage marriages, human trafficking, and the list goes on. Because of all the violence and abuse, the cult would move around quite often. Did all the moving stop them from being violent? Nope. They continued this pattern till Ervil was finally sentenced to life in prison for ordering the murder of rival Mormon cult leader Rulon C. Allred in 1977. Ervil became paranoid in prison and thinks his former followers are betraying him. He writes a hit list for his children and uses the blood atonement practice to convince them to murder the lost followers. And one of his sons takes it seriously. His son plans a series of murders together with some other members. He murdered many of his brothers and sisters along with other cult members. And Ervil would die in prison at the age of 56 in 1981, which seems like an easy death for a very depraved man. The Raelian Movement. also known as Raelism, was founded in 1974 by Claude Virilin. Claude started the cult after coming into contact with aliens in France. These aliens chose to impart knowledge of the origin of humanity to him and appointed him as their messenger. He was then tasked to prepare the Earth for their arrival. Claude rose to the occasion, renaming himself Rael and establishing Raelism. He began preaching to others that humans weren't created by God, rather they were created by highly intelligent alien life forms called Elohim. Rael is the last prophet among a line of prophets including, but not limited to, Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad. The cult is hierarchical, with different membership levels from 0 to 6, with Rael holding the highest position as prophet. Their practices are also just as bizarre as their beliefs. Raelians practice sensual meditation, a guided meditation technique that aims to transmit their love to the Elohim. The ultimate goal of the meditation is to achieve a cosmic orgasm. They're really giving reaching nirvana a whole new meaning. Surprisingly, this cult also fought for many progressive causes like LGBTQ rights, bodily autonomy, peace, and also against female genital mutilation, which is called clitorade. And I just want to know what went on in their mind. Financial exploitation is basically like a subscription service where members of the cult are encouraged, not forced, to donate 10% of their income to finance the construction of an embassy for Elohim in Jerusalem and to maintain a pure genetic code by avoiding caffeine, cigarettes, and recreational drugs. I think some drugs might do them well because if they're like this sober, I need to see what they'd be like high. Raelians are also big on cloning. They believe immortality can be achieved by advanced cloning. They claim to have successfully cloned a female baby, but for privacy reasons, they will not show her to the world. Unlike other cults or religions, you don't have to die to meet the gods that created you. Rael prophesies that the Elohim will return in 2035, and if humanity doesn't have its shit together and doesn't build him a welcome-back embassy on neutral territory, one of two things will happen. Either humans get obliterated or they just won't share their advanced technology with us. But if the Elohim decides to stay, they will establish a geniocracy, where only people who are 50% above the mean IQ can hold office, and people 10% above the mean can vote. So if the average IQ is 100, the lowest IQ for a candidate would be 150, and for a vote would be 110. More than half the US won't be able to vote in this government. But as always, the good never lasts with cults. There are accusations that the cult advocates for children to be more intimately active. 2 former members were even found guilty of systematically corrupting teenage girls in 2006. Rael also recruits attractive women into his Order of Angels, who either fulfill Rael's depraved desires or save themselves for the Elohim when they return. But Rael can still go all the way with them because he belongs to the prophet bloodline, which connects to the supreme alien Yahweh. Even with these criticisms, the cult thrives with over 80,000 members worldwide. They aren't as can murder you, will murder you, but based on the sheer absurd claims, I couldn't help but place them higher on this list. Tier 5. The Aghori. The name is derived from the Sanskrit word Agor, meaning fearless. The Aghori are based on Hinduism, in the sense that they just took everything taboo in Hinduism and made a cult out of it. 2 of the Hindu goddesses, Shiva the Destroyer and Kali the Goddess of Death, are central to their belief system and practices. The Aghori embrace the death in everything they do, whether it's living near cremation sites or rubbing the ashes of some poor guy all over themselves. They justify this by saying their practices help destroy the ego inside humans and help them see the beauty in everything, even death. Also, they believe it protects them from diseases. They also see no difference between good and evil or between human and animal flesh. Great. Cannibalism, just what we needed on this list. If it helps you feel better, they don't eat live humans, only dead ones. The Aghori consume human flesh from corpses that are brought for cremation. The Aghori also renounce all their attachments to the material world and, by extension, material objects. Sadly, that includes clothes as well. They often remain only in a loincloth or nude. Speaking of controversial choices, they also use human skulls as utensils, as it helps them break the barrier between life and death. The Aghori are also associated with black magic and the use of intoxicants. They use a shortcut to enlightenment, using a little liquid courage to break down those spiritual barriers. It's unconventional, but hey, whatever works, right? Superior Universal Alignment, another UFO cult on this list. Superior Universal Alignment was founded by Valentina de Andrade in 1981. She claimed that aliens contacted her and told her that humanity was on its way to destruction. But like the Raelians, she and her followers would be saved if they followed the aliens' warnings. She preached that Jesus was also an alien sent down to Earth to guide mankind towards salvation, and that males born after 1981 are embodiments of evil that need to be exterminated. This is the first I've heard of discrimination based on birth year. These embodiments of evil would be used as sacrifices for the aliens she met, and she wasn't kidding. Between 1981 and 1993, 19 Brazilian boys aged 8 to 14 were kidnapped, mutilated, assaulted, and left to die in the woods. The cult members who carried out these grotesque murders were prominent individuals. People you wouldn't think would be capable of this, like doctors, businessmen, and policemen. In 2003, several members were found guilty and sentenced. But the head of the snake, Valentina, was let go. The cult is still active today. The Manson Family. Another violent entry is the Manson Family, founded by Charles Manson in the late 1960s. Charles sharpened his philosophical claws while in prison, and when he was released, he quickly established himself as a guru. Manson preached about the end of times and how he, like all before him, was the manifestation of Jesus. Are there no original ideas anymore? Manson radicalized his followers by convincing them that they were in an apocalyptic race war that would bring about the end times, which he called helter-skelter. But when Manson lost patience in the war happening by itself, he tried to set it off himself. Why, you ask? Well, Manson believed that the race war would be won by black people. Once the superior race had been established, he and his followers would emerge to rule over black people. Now I know these guys were taking a lot of drugs. Manson sent his followers on a murder spree to kickstart Helter Skelter. On August 9, 1969, Manson family members Susan Atkins, Tex Watson, and Patricia Krenwinkel entered the home of Hollywood actress Sharon Tate and murdered her and 4 others, including Abigail Folger, Wojtek Frykowski, Jay Sebring, and Stephen Parent. These came to be known as the Tate murders. The gruesome nature of the murders made headlines, but did not start the war Manson was hoping for. Rather, they led to his capture. In 1971, Manson and several of his followers were convicted of the Tate murders, and they were also indicted in the LaBianca murders. Manson, Watson, Atkins, Kasabian, and Krenwinkel were sentenced to death, but their sentences were commuted to life in prison after California abolished the death penalty in 1972. And in 2017, Manson died in prison at the age of 83. Heaven's Gate. The cult was founded by Marshall Applewhite and wife Bonnie Nettles in 1974. The two had only 2 years, and in that time, I don't know how many drugs they did. But they came to the conclusion that they were the 2 end-time witnesses mentioned in the Bible, and so they kickstarted their campaign. This was also a UFO cult, as they believed the Earth was about to be annihilated, and the only way to save ourselves would be to, you guessed it, listen to Marshall and Nettle. Heaven's Gate promised its followers that they would be saved and taken to the kingdom of heaven via a soul-sucking spaceship. And many, many people were convinced by this and joined to live in isolation in preparation for their ascension. But 2 things started to break the illusion for many members. 1, the date prophesied by Marshall and Nettle passed, and the world was still here. This they glossed over by giving a new prophecy. And 2, the death of Nettle. When someone who claims to be an immortal being from a higher dimension of existence dies, people start questioning what's going on. But Marshall was smart, or insane, or both. He simply said that Nettle went first to make preparations for us. In 1997, when the Halley-Bopp comet was predicted to appear, they believed that it was the apocalyptic time prophesied, and decided it was time to shed their earthly bodies and hop aboard the spaceship. So, a total of 39 members of the cult matched their dressing and committed mass suicide. It wasn't done instantly together, more like in batches. Each member wore the same black shirt and sweatpants with Nike shoes and $5.75 in their pockets. Their website is still up, and apparently if you email them, they respond. The Anthill Kids. Arguably one of the most disturbing and disgusting cults on this list. The Anthill Kids was established by Roche Thériault in Canada. In the beginning, Roche's cult was based on the Seventh-day Adventist beliefs, but with his own interpretations. I mean, everyone else was doing it, so why not? He was extremely charismatic and good with words. Two important qualities for a cult leader, I guess. Roche had gained a few supporters from his time at a Seventh-day Adventist church, and these vulnerable young adults would later move in with him. After gaining a decent following, he isolated them in a cabin in the woods. And just like that movie, this story also doesn't have a good ending. His followers were stripped of their identities as he gave them new names, and they were starving and sleep-deprived, so naturally they were very obedient to Roche. And when he suggested every woman in the cult should be married to him, they had no choice but to agree. Roche's violent and sadistic tendencies were also at an all-time high. Members, even the children and pregnant women, were subjected to all kinds of abuse, including getting a few ribs broken for eating too many pancakes, being nailed to trees, or even having their limbs removed. He would even make them break their own legs with sledgehammers. The list goes on, but let's stop there. Roche believed as a vessel of God he could cure all illnesses. He would perform surgeries on members like removing their teeth, botched circumcisions, and even castrations. If you're asking yourself why wasn't anyone helping, well, Roche portrayed this image of a free-spirited, happy commune to the media, who wrote positive articles about the Anthill Kids. But Roche's sadistic rampages would soon be his downfall. Roche performed another one of his healing operations on a woman named Solange, who had stomach pains. He would proceed to cut her open and rip out her intestines with his bare hands and then crudely stitch her up and leave her there. She died, but that wasn't enough for Roche, so he dug her up again and, well, let's just sum it up with skull necrophilia. In 1993, he was convicted for the murder of Solange and one of the many infants he murdered. He received a life sentence and was later executed by a cellmate in 2011. Aum Shinrikyo, also known as Aum and Aleph, was founded by Shoko Asahara in 1987. Shoko Asahara started the cult as a yoga and meditation class, and he, like all the others before him and those that would come after him, claimed that a god came down from the heavens and appointed him as the god of light to fight against all evil. Their beliefs were pretty standard as cults go. Doomsday was around the corner and only the people who followed Shoko Asahara would be saved. He also convinced members of the cult that disobedience of his orders would result in being reincarnated as animals or being thrown in different hells. To be allowed into the cult, you had to pay a hefty entrance fee and consume various parts of Shoko Asahara, like his hair, blood, bathwater, or, least disgusting, his leftovers. You also had to give up all your worldly possessions and live in the commune. You'd think by now people would pick up on the pattern here. None of this deterred members from joining, rather. Aum Shinrikyo grew exponentially, attracting academics, engineers, doctors, chemists, and even military personnel. But Asahara wasn't satisfied with the numbers, so he used a popular Japanese form of media, anime. It must have worked because Asahara went on to publish a manga too. I won't bore you with the plot, it was just propaganda. But all of this was still not enough, so he declared himself, you guessed it, Jesus Christ. To his credit, he added another title of Enlightened One. Asahara would rule the cult with an iron fist, isolating members from the outside world and gaslighting them into doubting themselves, to the point that the only person they trust is Asahara. Aum Shinrikyo would also threaten and physically assault people if they tried to leave. The families of the members of the cult would plead to the media outlets, and one anti-cult lawyer, Tsutsumi Sakamoto, would jump in to help and prepare to launch a lawsuit against Aum Shinrikyo and also make a documentary of sorts destroying the divine image of Asahara with proof. But tragedy struck when the footage was leaked to the cult before it could be aired. Tsutsumi Sakamoto, along with his wife and infant child, disappeared overnight. I won't leave you in suspense. They were brutally membered by members of the cult, and their bodies wouldn't be found till 6 years later when the sarin attack happened. But this display of intimidation didn't work, and people continued to work against the cult. And Shoko Asahara decided it was time to work on a higher scale. The chemists and military personnel of the cult came together to create sarin gas, which is an odorless and colorless gas that will murder you in the most painful way possible within 10 minutes. They tested the gas first on a neighborhood, and 10 people died, but it wasn't linked to Aum Shinrikyo. And on March 20, 1995, carried out their main attack on the busiest Tokyo subway station. Cult members released the inside of it to the train, resulting in 13 deaths and 6,000 injured. Shoko Asahara and 6 other members were sentenced to death. Asahara's sentence was carried out on July 6, 2018. Aum Shinrikyo separated into 2 cults, Aleph and the Circle of Light. Both deny any relation to Shoko Asahara's teaching, but with cults, you never know. People's Temple, the cult that is infamous for the mass murder-suicide of 909 members in Jonestown. Jim Jones started the People's Temple in Indianapolis, where he preached a mix of Christian and socialist ideologies. And because this was the 1950s, he attracted many African Americans with his woke vision of an integrated congregation. Jones would also perform these miracles, which were fake, of course, but the people ate it up. Like, how do they not find the guy who wears sunglasses indoors and at night sus? Jones was very charismatic, with an enthusiastic worship style he copied from black preachers and speakers. He was like an evil little white Les Brown. His style, fake miracles, and leftist sermons gained him a massive following. Jones wanted to build his own private utopia, so he invited these people to live in a commune, which went well for a while. But with his narcissistic God complex, it was bound to fail at some point. His cult drew criticism from the media with accusations of financial fraud, physical mistreatment of members, and abuse of children in its care. Members of the cult were reportedly beaten, sleep-deprived, and forced to go through loyalty tests, which is self-explanatory. Jones didn't allow anyone to leave, going as far as threatening to murder them if they did. And just when you think Jones couldn't get worse, he does. He would take advantage of all members, male or female, of his cult. Anyone who rebelled was instantly punished with reduced food rations, harsher work schedules, public ridicule, humiliation, and sometimes physical violence. To escape the bad press and keep his hold on his cult, he took his followers to Guyana in 1977. He convinced them to come by telling them the world was ending soon. And the abuse continued there as well. Jones would often hold white night rehearsals, where he'd play mind games with members, telling them they had been poisoned when it was just Kool-Aid. Jones also pitted members against each other by asking them to turn in anyone who wanted to leave. In November 1978, Congressman Leo Ryan of California visited Jonestown at the request of concerned relatives of the cult members. All seemed well on the surface, but after a while, some members would tell him they wanted to leave. Ryan and his party took the 20-plus defectors of the cult to the airstrip with them. This made Jones furious and unhinged. And so he does what any insane cult leader does. He sends an armed party to murder them. Congressman Leo and many others at the airstrip were murdered by the armed temple members. Back in Jonestown, Jim Jones spiraled into madness fueled by his paranoia. He gathered all of his followers and convinced them that more people would come here and take their children away to torture them. He said the only way to escape perceived threats of the outside world was revolutionary suicide, as if normal suicide isn't morbid enough. The children were the first to be given cyanide-laced Kool-Aid to make sure parents would not have any reason to resist. Many of the adults were forced to drink the Kool-Aid at gunpoint, and some had cyanide injected into them. Some drank it willingly, staying loyal to Jones till the end. Jones, being the coward that he was, didn't drink the Kool-Aid, rather died via a gunshot wound to the head. The death toll from this mass murder-suicide was 909 people, with 304 children under the age of 18. That's all the cults we have today. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember, kids, if someone tells you they can save your soul, run.